Do you believe in Bigfoot? Learn more on the next Mystic Fix.
Mystic Fix, a program for the whole being with Julia Gordon-Bramer on News Talk STL.
Welcome to Mystic Fix. I'm Julia Gordon-Bramer. I am a poet, a scholar of mysticism, and a professional tarot card reader. And we've got a really fun show for you today. Do you believe in Bigfoot? We are going to talk to two experts on the subject. The first one is the pretty well-known filmmaker, Seth Breedlove. He's done movies on topics such as Mothman and the Bell Witch and UFOs. He's the founder of a company called Small Town Monsters. Following Seth, who gets two segments of our show, we're going to do the third segment. Instead of tarot this week, we're going to talk to an anthropologist, Dr. Jarrett Rominsky, also about Bigfoot. So it is all Bigfoot for the whole hour. Sit tight and get some popcorn. We are so excited today to have on Mystic Fix Seth Breedlove, who is an American filmmaker, founder of a company called Small Town Monsters, a production company in Wadsworth, Ohio, I believe. And Seth, you have directed over a dozen documentary films and miniseries related to cryptids and cryptozoology. So today, I'd especially like to talk about Bigfoot. I read that you had your own Bigfoot sighting just a couple of years ago, I believe, and that you've been interested in Bigfoot for probably most of your life after the sightings around your town of Bolivar, Ohio, right?
Yeah, the timeline is a little different. I didn't get into Bigfoot until probably my mid 20s, I think. So
Okay.
it wasn't my entire life, but there were sightings around the town that I grew up in when I was growing up. I wasn't really aware of them until a little later in life when I started getting into the topic.
Okay. And then what's one of your most memorable encounters while doing these investigations that you do?
Um, Well, it's probably my sighting, which
Uh-huh.
happened near yeah, it's a very small community outside of Canton, Ohio, in Stark County, where there was actually a number of sightings that took place there back in the 70s, that kind of like catapulted the community onto the main stage and served as the focus for our first film called Minerva Monster. But I was filming a show for our YouTube series, our YouTube channel called The Bigfoot Project. And we were down there hanging trail cameras, and maybe like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we were riding around the property. It was a pretty good sized property, like 400 acres. And we were in a Gator ATV and crossed a pipeline, and I glanced up the pipeline and just saw this dark brown figure crossing from the left side of the pipeline to the right across the clear cut. And when I saw it, it was just going into the woods. So I only saw it for, maybe like a second, maybe even a little less than that.
Like most sightings, right? I mean,
Yeah,
nobody's ready usually to film them.
right.
So that must have been the most mind-blowing thing ever after having studied Bigfoot for so long to believe you've seen it,
Mhm.
whether or not it actually, do you think it could be part wishful thinking, or are you pretty convinced?
Oh, no, I'm not convinced. No, in fact, like as time goes on, I find that I went from being 100% sure of what I saw to like where I am today, which is like 98% sure. But I also find myself second guessing it a lot, and it wasn't necessarily wishful thinking, because the last thing I expected to see at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a very sunny day was a Bigfoot. The night before, we had a lot of activity around the cabin we were staying at, and that was actually far more intense than seeing one.
So what is activity? Is it sounds? Is it
Yeah,
howling?
that night was really bizarre. There were numerous like wood knocks. There was, so the property we were staying at, it's a large property, but the cabin, there's a hunting cabin on the property that we stayed in, and it's at the bottom of a hill, and then at the top of that hill is a another patch of woods where there's a bunch of like old rubber drums that I don't know what they kept in them, if it was oil or what, but something was banging on one of those, which started the activity for the night. And then there was basically a series of events that occurred over like the course of 3 hours, with numerous individuals sort of surrounding us on a trail around the cabin. They didn't seem to care that we knew they were there, which was
Huh.
the more disturbing part about it. Was they just kind of like came right up to the edge of the wood line, to where we couldn't see them, and were throwing rocks. A rock went right past our heads when we were on the trail. The most disturbing thing that happened that night was my son was there. My son was, at the time, I think he was 4. He was with the property owner's kids in the hunting cabin. They were watching their iPad on one of the beds, and someone else had stayed at the cabin just to keep an eye on the kids. And while they were there, they heard bipedal footsteps like walk up to the window that looks into the room where the kids were. This was a grown man, and he was very concerned about it, to the point where he started yelling. So he thought he might, startle whatever it was away. But that was the night prior to the sighting. So there had been activity all that weekend.
Huh. And did
It
anyone
was
know you were there? I mean, do you think, I'm sure you've questioned this already. Could somebody have been messing with you because they knew that you guys were doing an investigation?
not unless they had a death wish. Usually, this is like rural farmland in Ohio, with
Uh-huh.
nothing but that. There's, I think, maybe two or three other farm properties that butt up against this property, that border the property, um, and anyone on walking around in those woods doing that kind of stuff would you'd almost have to have a death wish, because the people that we were there with were armed.
Uh-huh.
The neighboring
Wow.
farmers are armed. Like, it's not a
Okay.
wouldn't be the most intelligent move.
So, of course, there are critics. There are always skeptics and critics. But I think one of the things that I appreciate about your work is, you kind of approach it from the culture. You're not
Mhm.
saying this is absolute fact or hard 100% evidence here, but you're sort of suggesting possibilities and talking about the history and the lore behind it, and how maybe our environments shape us to some degree. That said, do you believe 100% yourself that there is a Bigfoot of some kind?
I'm 99% at this point.
Okay, because yeah, you said you lost 2 percentage points as you after your
Yeah,
sighting.
I lost 2% in my own sighting, but there's other things that have happened to me in the woods that make me fairly convinced they're there.
Uh-huh.
Unless I have like a true face one-on-one encounter, then
Yeah.
I don't know what I would
Did
think.
you did you see the news today? I got on my MSN whatever news flash that there was a Bigfoot sighting with a Bigfoot with a baby on its back. Did you see
Hmm.
this? It
No.
it just showed up today
Hmm.
with a photograph,
Hmm.
but some people are some experts are
Hmm.
declaring it a hoax. So I don't know, but it's a hot topic, and we want to believe. And I'm in Missouri here, and we have what they call Momo here in Missouri, which is sort of our version of it. I think all over the United States there are little nicknames and versions, and of course we've got like Yeti and
Hmm.
Sasquatch and all of that. Do you believe that this is a worldwide creature, with different species, um, or what?
I think the worldwide aspect of it actually throws more it throws more doubt on the subject to me,
Uh-huh.
because the idea that a flesh and blood creature is going to live around the world in every environment, um, it really boggles the mind, because we don't have that anywhere else in nature.
Sure.
So that's the biggest issue I have with it. But I mean, there really are legends, in countries around the globe. We were in Switzerland a few weeks ago, and there were stories in Switzerland of humanoid hairy creatures being seen while driving. There's legends of rock throwing demons or devils,
Huh.
at one spot in particular, which, if you know anything about Bigfoot lore, really sounds similar to like the Ape Canyon incident, things like that.
What
Um,
is that? I don't know that.
Ape Canyon was a famous event that happened in Bigfoot history back in, I want to say, the 1930s, but it might have been earlier than that, where a group of miners were attacked by rock hurling apes, which they had called devil. What do they call them? Devil monkeys, something like that. And they besieged this cabin overnight by throwing boulders at it.
How
Um,
interesting.
so there's a lot of stories like that,
Yeah.
in Bigfoot lore. But I was just shocked to find that even Switzerland had their own, version of the Bigfoot legend.
Right. So what are your techniques for, approaching? I mean, these are almost all eyewitness accounts, right?
Mhm.
There's a few little films and photos. But what is your test for validity? What makes you say I believe this or I don't?
Well, it's not my job to believe or not believe. From my own perspective, obviously I have my own opinions on things, but as a documentarian, I got my start in this by doing newspaper reporting. And so the thing I learned quickest in newspaper reporting, and something that a lot of journalists need to relearn apparently, is inserting my own,
Oh.
my own opinions on things doesn't really help tell the story that needs to be
Hmm.
told. So I try to remain very objective when it comes to this kind of stuff. When I'm making the On the Trail of Bigfoot series,
Hmm.
I will insert, some of my own thoughts on the subject, just because it's being told from my perspective. But
Hmm.
for the most part, what I'm trying to do is just document the incidents that people have claimed happened to them, or the history of sightings, or the history of a topic, something like that.
Hmm.
So I don't go into it trying to put holes in anyone's sighting report, although I've definitely turned down interviews because I just kind of believed the story that was being told was more than likely there to create some sort of sense of fame or notoriety for the
Yeah.
person telling it. We've done that ahead of time. I don't know that I've ever cut someone's personal sighting out of a movie after the fact, but
Uh-huh.
so that's how I approach it. I just try to be as objective as I possibly can.
Yeah. So you're approaching it from kind of a journalist methodology, though, of who, what, where, why, when, how kind of thing.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah, and that's all that just comes from my background in writing, and honestly, I don't care what I think most of the time, so I assume that most people won't care what I personally think about these subjects. So that's how I approach it.
Seth, how about equipment and techniques? What do you use on these investigations?
Well, just, I mean, for me, the stuff I do is far less like field intensive than the work that Alexander Pedikov or Eli Watson does for Small Town Monsters. They take thermal equipment and all that kind of stuff. Typically, if I'm out in the woods and I'm part of an investigation, I'm documenting someone else's investigation.
Okay.
But when we were doing the Bigfoot project, we had monoculars, um, infrared, and night vision. I'm a big fan of these drones. They have the infrared on them now as well, but haven't gotten to play around with that too much. Sound is very important when it comes to Bigfoot investigations, so I like to leave recorders out overnight anywhere I'm at, and then later you get to have the thrill of reviewing 8-9 hours of audio recording. So that's it. I don't consider myself a Bigfoot investigator by any stretch of the imagination. First and foremost, I'm a documentarian and a filmmaker.
Okay. Okay. And then would you call yourself a cryptozoologist as well?
No, no.
No. Okay. What's the definition of that then? Why are you not that? Because
I
you seem to be
docu.
kind of an expert to me.
I am not as interested in the creatures that are said to exist as I am in the cultural side of it, the people that are investigating what keeps them going. I'm always more interested in the human side of this kind of stuff than I am the creature side of it. That changes a little bit with Bigfoot, but for the most part, with most cryptids, I'm more driven to learn more about people and what their personal stake is and what keeps them going.
Mm.
So and just my knowledge anymore of these subjects is kind of informed by the films we're making. Whereas before, when we first had started creating Small Town Monsters movies, I had more time to focus on just fun reading books and learning things, about these topics. These days, I'm a dad. I'm running a production company, and I edit 3 movies a year and hours worth of YouTube content. So that's my focus. So I don't have as much time to just dive into this stuff for fun as I once did.
Real life gets in the way.
Yeah.
What Seth is your most convincing evidence that you've seen?
That I've seen.
Beyond your own eyewitness. Yeah, what has moved you the most? What has been the most exciting, maybe Bigfoot story?
Um, that's a good question. I've always been drawn to that Minerva monster story because it was about a family of people that had these sightings, these ongoing sightings of a creature behind their house back in the 70s. And they really suffered a lot of backlash because of coming forward with their encounter, to the point where kids would chant Bigfoot at them when they showed up at high school football games and stuff like that. I mean, the amount of ridicule that family went through, totally unearned, by the way, because even if they were just misidentifying a bear, like it's not,
Right.
it's not we're just
Right.
making them the subject of mockery. Um, that story I was always something I was very drawn to and still am today, and it is a believable piece of witnesses or evidence as well, just because it's eyewitness evidence. It's not, it has its flaws, but at the end of the day, they really believe they saw what they said they saw. And I don't know that I've interviewed too many witnesses that were as believable as the members of the Caton family. So
And
that's probably my favorite.
what makes them credible? Is it just a feeling, like, just their honesty coming
Yeah,
through?
I mean, that one especially, I had to convince them over the course of years. I spoke to that family for like 3 years prior to making the movie. I interviewed one of the younger. She was one of the youngest daughters when the entire incident went down. On the phone, I had interviewed her on the phone for a book that I was going to write. She would not do the movie. But very believable on the phone. And then her older brother Howie actually was in the movie, and yeah, very very believable witness.
Great. Well, we're going to take a short break and we will be back with Seth Breedlove, the well-known Bigfoot hunter and American filmmaker and founder of Small Town Monsters. We'll return in a few minutes.